doing? Thank you.
Yeah, she's been up to UCI to...
Right.
Just a few things. We are going to start today with the Pledge of Allegiance from Girl Scout Troop 7589. We have Ellie, Harper, and Skylar doing the Pledge of Allegiance for us.
Please stand and join us for the pledge. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Wow, good job. Good job, good job, good job.
Just a few things before we get started today. I did just want to thank you all for being here. I did email with a few of you. I missed you, Healy, and I'll step away from that mic. It is raining, and I know it's been difficult for people to get out today, so all of you who did make it, we all really very much appreciate it. The way that this is going to work today is that the congressman is going to speak with his guest speaker, Brett Sanders. I'll let Mike introduce him himself in a minute. And once they have done their intros and have a little conversation, we will do the Q&A part of the town hall. With the Q&A part of the town hall, those of you who chose to ask a question, you have a ticket. The last 3 digits of that ticket will be called. Cindy, David, and Neil. David will be drawing the numbers and giving them to Cindy. She'll call the last 3 numbers on the ticket for you. When your ticket is called, please come around the back, bend over so that you're not in the view of the video, and queue up here along this wall where Cindy is. She will hold the mic. You are not allowed to touch it. You will get 1 minute to ask your question, and the congressman and or Brett will have 3 minutes to answer. Once you ask your question, if you could please go back to your seat so that he can address everyone and make sure that everyone hears the answer appropriately. So now that I have done and gone through all of that, welcome, Congressman. We are looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to Misty and to our volunteers for doing such a great job. Thank you. I was going to say give a round of applause to the Girl Scouts, but they're already outside. They did a great job. My daughter's in the Girl Scouts, so very thrilled to see them. I really want to thank you all for coming out in the rain. That's really great. I want to thank Eileen for being out there in the rain and greeting you on the way in. And we had, normally we have pretty good ratio of RSVPs to people that turn out. Not necessarily true today because of that rain outside. So those of you that are here, I'm really grateful to you for being here. And I hope that it's worth your while. You could be watching football right now. So UCLA basketball. Do you want to know how it ended? No. Okay, I won't tell you. But very grateful that you're here. We have a great guest that we'll get to in just a second. I again want to thank our team. This is our 107th town hall, which is pretty amazing. And earlier today we had a house party. We do those house parties regularly as well, and we did our 250th house party earlier today, which is great. Maybe after this, if you're interested in hosting a house party down the road, let us know. We love doing that and going to different communities. I will just give you a very brief background about me, since I think there are some people here that are new that have never been to one of our events before. I live in San Juan Capistrano with my wife and our 2 kids. They're 11 and 9 years old. They go to our local Capital Unified Schools, 6th grade, Marco Forster Middle School for our son, 4th grade at San Juan Elementary for our daughter. I was first elected in 2018, got sworn in January of 2019, and I've now been honored to serve as your federal representative for 5 years. Kind of hard to believe. When I started, I had no gray hair. No gray hair when I started. But I'm very honored to get to serve on the House Natural Resources Committee and the House Veterans Affairs Committee. Do we have any veterans in the room? I saw Stuart. Can we give the veterans a round of applause? And since we're going to talk quite a bit about the environment with Professor Sanders, I want to make sure to just talk about veterans for a second. So you don't hear a lot about the work that's done in Congress on veterans. For that matter, you don't hear a lot about the bipartisan work being done in Congress at all. Seems like the press really just wants to focus on the most outrageous, controversial, partisan, polarizing stuff. And anytime I'm in Washington, D.C., by the way, I'm really happy not to be in Washington, D.C. right now. Number one, it was snowing yesterday, and number two, it's just good to be among reasonable, rational, normal people. But you don't hear a lot about just getting work done, and the media there, you know, they really love for us all to try to tear each other to shreds. But for veterans, our office has been able to lead about 24 bills that have now become law, signed into law by both the former president and the current president, to deal with veterans' health care, housing, homelessness, the GI Bill, transition assistance, workforce development. And I did not know going into this job, but that is the most rewarding part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. Also, we've got 2 great veterans on staff, and we're very honored to be working with the folks, the high school students interested in the service academies as well. So if you know anybody interested in that, it's just a great thing that we do, and the veteran casework as well. So for those of you, like I see Stuart, I know Stuart has been in touch with our office about VA-related matters, but if others are interested, please be in touch. The other thing I'll mention, we've got a whole lot of local environmental issues in this district. And look, we live in paradise, okay? We really do. Our district goes all the way up to Laguna Niguel. We obviously have here in San Clemente, we have San Juan, we have Dana Point, Rancho Mission Viejo, which is the fastest growing part of our entire congressional district, is Rancho Mission Viejo, Camp Pendleton, and then all of northern San Diego County. So Oceanside, Carlsbad, Vista, Encinitas, Solana Beach, and Del Mar. And I think it's paradise. I don't know about you, but I really do. But nowhere is perfect, and we know that our beaches are eroding, our bluffs are collapsing, our rail corridor is at risk all the time of closure. We've got, you know, important historic structures like Casa Romantica here in San Clemente, had a terrible landslide. We've had other really important structures at risk. And look, Mother Nature always wins. Mother Nature always wins. So we've got to be cognizant of that. We've got to prepare for the future, and we've got to be strategic. And I always talk about 3 S's. We need 3 S's. We need sand, stabilization, and stakeholder engagement. So when it comes to sand, you're going to hear a lot from Professor Sanders about why that's important. When it comes to stabilization, every year, working with the Army Corps of Engineers and our state and county and local partners, making sure that those at-risk areas are stabilized and that the rail line can continue to run. That's been happening in Del Mar. It's been happening in San Clemente. I think we all know about that. And then stakeholder engagement. We're going to need a whole lot of that. And it's not necessarily going to be our office. In fact, it isn't going to be our office. But you've got OCTA, you've got SANDAG, you've got a lot of people who want to have their voices heard, and rightfully so. But we need to be thinking about what all this is going to look like in 50 years and 100 years. And, you know, as I said, Mother Nature always wins. Let me also give you just a couple brief other updates. San Onofre. So obviously, again, we live in paradise, but we've got nuclear waste not far from here. And, you know, sometimes out of sight, out of mind, but it's very much on my mind because it is a federal responsibility. And I won't stop until we figured out where we're going to move that stuff. Because what we have right now is 1,600 tons of spent nuclear fuel. We've got 2 active earthquake faults. We've got rising sea levels. We've got 9 million of all of us that live within 50 miles of that plant. So a couple things I'll mention. One is I've got legislation with Darrell Issa, with my predecessor, bipartisan legislation, that says for all of the nation's nuclear waste sites, of which there are about 80, move the waste first from those areas with the highest seismic risk. We win. The highest population density, we're tied with New York. And the highest national security concerns, as defined by, do you have a military base nearby? And yes, we do. In fact, the song's waste is actually on Navy land, which you may or may not be aware of. So that would obviously be very important for us. Now, the second piece is, where are you going to send this stuff? And the federal government had all of its eggs in the basket of Yucca Mountain in Nevada until about 2008, 2009, when the Obama administration put a stop to Yucca Mountain. Trump administration continued to block Yucca Mountain. Biden administration continues to block Yucca Mountain. I have been there. I've seen it for myself. I think you have technical hurdles and you have political hurdles. The technical hurdles, I am not an expert, but I've heard both sides of their groundwater concerns that are very real, and there's about a zillion lawsuits. So those are real, but the political hurdles cannot at present be overcome. So we've got to do everything we can to get the consent of one or more communities who are willing to take spent nuclear fuel. So towards that end, I got about $100 million to the Department of Energy for them to do exactly that. And they're finally embarked on the process they should have been embarked on 20 years ago, 30 years ago, to have a consent-based process to permit and site one or more spent nuclear fuel sites. And in the interim, between here and there, we're going to need to figure out transportation. And the DOE is working on a rail car system, and we're helping to fund that too. So it's all happening. And in the last, 24 months, I think we've done more than had been done in the prior 10 years, 15 years. So I'm excited about that. And we were able to announce a lot of this with Jennifer Granholm, who's our energy secretary, and she came out here to Songs to do that on 2 different occasions. So that's something that's always very much on my mind. The last thing I'll say, this past week we funded the government, we, the Congress, funded the government until March the 1st for some of the government and March the 8th for the balance of the government. And it's called a continuing resolution, if you've heard that phrase. It means punt, right? And unfortunately, we've seen punt after punt after punt. This is no way to run anything. This is no way to run the government. This is no way you'd run your household budget. This is no way to run anything. So what do we need? I think we need 2 things. Number one, we have to keep in mind that we should not shut the government down. We definitely could shut the government down, but it would be a horrible thing to do. And I see it perhaps more than most members of Congress because I've gotten to know a lot of Marines and their families, and the junior enlisted Marines at Camp Pendleton right now are barely making ends meet. As we all know, cost of living is very high here. I have advocated time and again for them to get pay raises, for their basic allowance for housing to increase, to provide their children with better schools, and to make sure they've got enough to eat. And we've been working on this for 5 years. And if the government were to shut down, one of the first problems would be that our armed services would not get paid. They would lose their paycheck. So you think about that E3, E4 who doesn't get paid, and you think about the impact that has on their family. And I won't allow that to happen. And my colleagues won't allow that to happen. I think the vast majority of them. And Kevin McCarthy wouldn't allow that to happen. That was ultimately why McCarthy agreed with us to fund the government for 45 days back in September that led 8 people to throw him out. Y'all remember that. So we can't shut the government down. That's number one. Number two is that Mike Johnson, the new speaker, has a choice to make. And the choice is this. He either can work with not just Democrats, but a lot of Republicans too. There are probably 350 of us that I call the Common Sense Caucus. 350, I would say, of the 435 that want to fund the government. Maybe 320, actually. And we want to do the right thing. We want to fund the government. We want to keep our military funded. We want to keep our public safety funded. We want to keep our border patrol funded. And then there are, a handful that would rather shut the whole thing down and that are threatening to throw Johnson out. So he can either continue to placate them or he can work with the rest of us. And that's ultimately going to be the decision. So that's sort of where things stand. The other thing I will mention to you is there's a big supplemental bill that funds aid to Ukraine, Israel, humanitarian assistance, and border security. I want to see all those things done. I'm a Democrat, yes. I want to see border security. I want to fund the border patrol. I want to make sure that people who work hard and play by the rules have a path to citizenship in this country, particularly those who've served in our military. And we need bipartisan reform that both sides can agree on. Rather than playing politics with the issue, we've got to try to come together and find solutions to the issue. So I'm actually encouraged by what I'm seeing from the Senate. But once again, Johnson has a decision to make, whether he works with 300, 320, 350 of us to pass something, or whether he continues to placate just a handful of people to try to save his job. So those are the stakes right now. There are other things happening too, but I won't bore you with that. I won't bore you with that. I want to talk about sand. We have an in-house expert on sand, so I want to make sure you hear from him. So let me just say real quick, the San Clemente Beach Nourishment project serves to stabilize our shoreline, our bluffs. I mentioned the rail corridor, 251,000 cubic yards of sand on the beach. It's about 50 feet worth right near the pier between T Street and Linda Lane. When I took office in 2019, most of the technical analysis had been already completed by the Army Corps of Engineers in 2010. And it had been a dormant project. When I got into office, it was not authorized for funding. No funding had been appropriated. The Army Corps had not prioritized the project. We worked very hard to build a relationship of confidence and trust with them. We explained that the project was not just about pretty sand on the beach and coastal tourism, although coastal tourism is important to us. It was about safety, about security. You might remember in 2019 there was a bluff collapse down in Encinitas that killed 3 people. And it's also the corridor, the rail corridor, is part of the strategic rail corridor network for the Department of Defense. So it connects the 5 bases. So we got the military involved. And they said, we want this sand as well. Not just in San Clemente, but also in Solana Beach. And so we got it funded. We had the bipartisan infrastructure law, if you remember, that provided a lot of funding. We used one of our community project funding grants for San Clemente, and about $40 million overall between Solana Beach and San Clemente. So, the other thing, it's a 50-year commitment, 50-year commitment from the Army Corps, and the money that we got will fund roughly the first 5 or 6 years of sand. So, how do they get the sand? And Professor can talk about this more, but they have to borrow the sand from elsewhere. And the Army Corps analysis back in 2010 said borrow it from this site in Oceanside. Meanwhile, in parallel, there's another project down in Solana Beach to get sand down there, and they're going to borrow sand from Solana Beach. So turns out that the contractor couldn't find any acceptable sand at the Oceanside borrow site. So I said, perhaps naively, I'm not a technical expert, why don't you just use the Solana Beach site where you just found sand? And they said, huh, interesting. So what they're doing in the interim is they move the dredge down there. They're doing the Solana Beach sand right now. And in the interim, they are getting the permits that they need from the relevant people like the Air Quality Management District and state lands and the rest to get the dredging equipment back here and to get sand on our beach here. So that's what's happening. I won't stop until that's done. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Brett Sanders. Brett is Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at UC Irvine. Go Anteaters. And Zot. And he's going to talk about why projects like this are so important. His research group specializes in the development of innovative algorithms for flow and transport in river and coastal systems and the integration of information technologies to create more accurate and efficient simulation tools. Flooding and erosion hazards are the primary focus of current research, particularly coastal flooding and urban flooding. Other interests include surface water quality, low-impact development impacts on hydrology, dam break flooding, aerial and terrestrial LiDAR scanning, geographical information systems, high-performance computing, and simulation tools for decision-making. So only the easy stuff is kind of what
Try to keep it simple.
Well, I really want to thank Professor Sanders for joining us and for his knowledge and expertise. The floor is yours. Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman Levin, for inviting me to be here and for your interest in science and in the best technologies to understand problems and take common sense solutions. So it's a pleasure to be here today and join all of you. I thought I'd start by speaking a little bit about sand as a really important resource that's often overlooked. So the sands we have along our coast they start off in our hills and Traditionally, they would flow down our hills through streams, and they'd work their way to the coast, and they'd be spread out, up and down the coast. We'd also get sand supplied from the erosion of our cliffs. So there were really two main supplies that provided sand to this coastline, river supplies and cliff erosion. And so one of the bigger trends that we've seen across California and any developed areas is as we build out, engineers design developments to not let soil move. Okay. So there's been just a systematic, basically, as we build out across Southern California, we've systematically taken steps to hold sediment in place, and that has reduced the amount of sand that's supplied to our coast. But that's part of like a broader global issue, which is that sand is really increasingly a scarce resource. There is enormous demand for sand around the world. Anybody know what is the biggest demand for sand globally?
Concrete.
Concrete. Basically, more than 75% of the 80% of the total sand consumption globally comes from the need for concrete. And this is coming, it's coming huge amount of demand from China and growing big cities in those areas and other parts of the world that have been growing really quickly. They've put enormous pressure on the globe to find sand supplies. And there's now concern around the world around illegal sand mining, where there is new industries popping up, even with, around the world with taking trucks to coastlines all around the world and filling up the trucks with sand and then moving those sands inland and leaving behind a community that just lost a really important natural resource, a resource that, first of all, provides protection against storms for those coastal communities. It provides really important substrate for coastal ecosystems. Many grasses and ecological functions of the coastal zone demand a certain amount of sand. And clearly, like, the sand is also a driver of tourism. And for years, like, areas that are warmer climates have fought for sand to try to maintain their tourist economy. And the research has shown that when you lose your beach, tourists go elsewhere. And the funding that comes with that tourism, the people staying in hotels and the people going to restaurants and the people flying airplanes and those sorts of revenues then go down. And then the coastal communities can see a spiral downwards where less income coming into city coffers, less resources to manage their coastal resources and so on. So sand, it turns out, is a really important resource that doesn't get enough attention as something that we need to kind of care for and manage and think about. And so another question I get asked sometimes is, why don't we go to the desert? And why don't we grab sand from the desert? And the answer to that question is that desert sands tend to get rounded out from basically winds blowing sands. They actually get rounded out and made very spherical compared to coastal and river sands, which remain really angular. And you might say, why in the world would, like, a wind blowing across the desert cause the same material, the feldspars and the silica and different things, to get all rounded, whereas these powerful waves crashing on the beach, they don't round out the sand grains? Isn't that an interesting question? Yes. So I bet you'd like an answer. So the answer to that question has to do with a safe landing. Okay? So if you're a grain of sand and you're flying through the air and you then hit another grain of sand, that's what's going to cause the sand to get rounded out. And so when you fly through air, there's nothing to cushion, really very little mass in the air to cushion that landing. And when a sand grain strikes another sand grain underwater, the water gets in the way and it's heavy and it cushions the connection. And that basically prevents those sand grains from being rounded out. Okay, so not only is there a sand shortage, but the sands we need that are along the coast are really the most precious sands for building materials. And so that puts enormous pressure on sand globally. And it really behooves us to think seriously about managing this as a resource. and keeping track of our supplies of sand and how we use sand and who's using sand. And one of the initiatives I'm trying to kind of raise awareness of for the past few years is that systematically across Southern California, we have flood control systems that are designed for only water. They're not designed to move sediment, but they still collect sediment. There's still sediment that gets into channels and they build up. And then when they build up with sediment, vegetation starts to grow. And that reduces the flow capacity of those channels and introduces a flood risk. And because of that flood risk, counties and flood control districts, they go out and they clean out the channels. And historically, a lot of that dredge material has been taken to sorting facilities in inland areas. And then some of it goes into building materials, some of it goes into landfills, but very little of it came to the coast. I was so excited this past year because Susan Brodeur with the County of Orange and Riley Pratt in State Parks and Supervisor Foley in the County of Orange, I think, took notice that, you know what, let's be smart about this. And they had, from a record wet year, we had sediment that had built up in the Santa Ana River, large volumes, and they said, we're going to truck that sediment anyways. Why don't we send the trucks to the beach instead of back to Santa Ana? And so that this past year, that was done, and it put 45,000 cubic yards of sediment on Doheny Beach, and 1/5 the size of the planned project. But it shows what can happen when we think locally, act locally, right? And think, and just sort of, within a year, sand was placed in within the same sort of littoral zone here that this project that we're planning is also going to be placed in. And all these projects are going to work together. The sand placed in one spot of this coast is going to be dispersed up and down the coast, and it's going to contribute to sort of what we call a regional littoral cell that is kind of a community shared resource. The sand we place is going to be, it's going to set there, it's going to make the beach a little wider where you place it, but that sand's going to be pulled offshore, it's going to be spread up and down the coast. And what happens naturally with sand along the coast is that when we have more energetic waves, the waves will pull the material more offshore, and the sand will sit a little bit offshore in a coastal bar or sometimes a coastal pad. Okay, and then it's a way that beaches naturally dissipate the powerful energy of storms. Big wave events come, the beach gets eaten away as basically a way to cushion the impact of that storm event and protect the railroad, to protect Pacific Coast Highway, to protect housing, to protect other water treatment plants and all the other infrastructure we have along the coastline. Okay, so it's natural that the way nature worked, the way nature designed coastal protection was to have sand that builds up on the coast in periods of low wave energy and then is pulled off the coast in periods of high wave energy. But think of the sands, nature wants to move it onshore, offshore, onshore, onshore, on a sort of a seasonal cycle. So it's important that we have enough sand in play so that nature can do its work. If we systematically starve the coast of sand, then nature can't do its work. And so then we have a responsibility to step in and say, can we bring more river supplies to the coast? Can we take sand that's offshore, that's gone deeper than it's ever going to come back? And can we pump that back onshore and get that back in the littoral cell? And when we do that, we can restore some of the natural function of the coast. We've been looking at this stretch of the coastline, the Capistrano Bight, for the past few years, and trying to understand exactly, why did a stretch of the coastline, which has been fairly stable for so many years, seemingly out of nowhere just see much of its beaches disappear? And I think sediment supply is a simple answer to that. Years of reduced sediment supply led to a slow thinning of the amount of sand that's in the littoral cell, and eventually there just wasn't enough sand to be pushed back on the beach. But I think there's a more nuanced story there, which is that let's see. So we looked at the satellite data. We've looked at both historical aerial imagery and we've looked at satellite data to try to see how the beach has changed over the past 100 years. And going back to that historical aerial imagery, we can see that the beach widened and narrowed and widened and narrowed seasonally, and El Niños there'd be some changes. But even up until around the year 2000, the coastline was fairly stable. But starting around 2000, we saw like this beginning of a decline in the beaches. And then the last few years, it's a precipitous decline. And so I think that coincides pretty well with the build out of Orange County. It coincides pretty well with the fact that when Dana Point Harbor was constructed, it disrupted the way waves move sediment from San Juan Creek. So after 1970, the waves that came from the west, which would normally pull sand from San Juan Creek down the coast into San Clemente, those waves were not able to approach the San Juan Creek outlet with the same angle. They tend to refract more and approach Doheny Beach from the south. And if you look at aerial imagery, you'll see that historically, North Doheny Beach was a very thin beach. South Doheny Beach was a wide beach. Since the construction of Dana Point Harbor, it's flip-flopped. Now North Doheny Beach is more than 100 meters wide, and South Doheny Beach is now, been really, really stressed, and we've seen sand loss, and we've had a nourishment project there. So that also shows us that the structures we build along the coast have a long-term impact. You don't see the impact right away, but in the long term, the cumulative effect of sort of the loss of the efforts of the waves, the diminished effort of the waves to move that sand south has affected the stretch of the coastline from Doheny Beach south to the pier and south of there. So, but broadly what the satellites show us is that satellite data and the wave data is that actually between Cottons Point and Dana Point is actually a fairly self-contained littoral cell. And you can think, well, this is our community. These are the people we have to work together with. It's because if sand is placed sort of south of the pier, say San Clemente Pier and towards Cotton Point, the waves will generally work that sediment a little northwards. And in the area from Doheny Beach, in that area, the waves will tend to work it a little southwards. But there'll also be a lot of mixing because when we get the south swell, the waves want to go up the coast. When we get the west swells, the sand wants to go down the coast. So it's a bit of a mixer out there. But there is a sense, I think the wave data shows us and the beach change data shows us that there is a sense that the Capistrano Bight is the scale at which we need to manage this problem. Yes. We need to work with the communities on the inland side. We need to work with the sort of cities along the coast. And I think you're doing that. I think that the steps that are being taken now with a nourishment project right in the middle, efforts to restore sand supplies up coast, and I would maybe pitch one more idea, which is some kind of a bypass near San Juan Creek, which a bypass, the idea is that you just take sediment that's accumulated near the outlet of San Juan Creek underwater and just pump that a couple hundred yards down the coast. What you're doing is moving it from a place where the waves don't move the sand to a spot where waves are going to start moving the sand and work that sand back into the... So that's my, my sort of sense of the site in a nutshell. Fortunately with Congressman Levin's leadership, hopefully we'll see the sand being, this replenishment project continuing at San Clemente. That sand in a big storm will get pulled offshore. You're going to go out there one day and the beach is going to be smaller. But remember that there is like a certain amount of play that you expect. You expect sand to be pulled offshore into a bar during big wave events. You expect during weaker wave events for that sand to be pushed back on the beach and for the beach to get wider. That's a natural cycle. We've even seen some recent research. I was at the American Geophysical Union meeting this winter in December, and some neat research out of Scripps showing that when the waves are too weak in summer, you don't get the recovery. I'd never really seen that before. So we need summer waves that are not too small in order for the waves to push the sand back onshore again during the summer. So anyway, thank you all for your interest in this problem, and thank you, Congressman Levin, for the chance to be here.
Thank you. Don't leave, because if anybody has questions about any of your work, I want you to be up here to take them. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Misty. Here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Take this one back. Thank you. thank
Okay,
you.
so Cindy is going to be holding the microphone, and once again, she is going to hold it. You all can touch it, but you cannot hold it as you are asking your question. When you come up again, please come around the back, form your queue along this side. She's going to call 3 numbers to start you off, and after each person asks a question, she will call another number. You get 1 minute to ask your question, and either the congressman or the professor will take 3 minutes to answer your question. So I will pass this on to her at this point, and thank you.
Okay, the first 3 numbers end in 009, 017, and 021. So if you could line up in that order.
Got 2 of them.
You're 17? Oh, maybe 9.
And please give your name
We're gonna,
and which city you live in.
and you're. No. Okay, so you get to start us off. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tony Nelson.
Hi
and,
there.
I live in Capistrano Beach, and I'm the founder of Capo Cares. And I have a million questions, but I'll try to keep it to 3 really short ones.
Okay.
But I would like your email, because I'd really like to pick your brain a little bit. Okay, number 1, my understanding is that when
This
the
is
Dana
Pete's
Point
question.
Harbor
Yeah.
was built, that there were 2 million cubic yards of sand deposited because they had to dredge everything, to make it. So that was deposited on Doheny Beach. And so the narrative we have in our community is that 2 million yards lasted almost 40 years, and it was about the year 2000. Nobody thought of replenishing, which was really dumb. If we had replenished every year, we wouldn't be in this position. But nobody thought about replenishing, so yeah, around the year 2000, we just kind of ran out. And definitely, that's when we started losing everything. So do you have a comment on that first?
Well, I think you've got a lot of local wisdom and knowledge in your community. I think our satellite data shows that the loss of beaches was really noticeable starting around 2000, and we also know from the sort of databases on sand placement that there was a large placement at Doheny at the time of the harbor construction, and that it makes perfect sense that there's an investment made, right, in 1970, 60s and 70s, putting a large volume of sand there, and it lasted quite a long time. And I think it reflects the fact that this is a good spot for sort of managing the coastline, because investments do have a lasting impact, but they just don't last forever. We can't expect them to go on forever.
Yeah, I would like to suggest that if we do get sand, and we loved getting the sand that we got last year through Katrina Foley, and we're so appreciative. It is beautiful sand, beautiful sand. And most of it, despite all of the storms that we've had and so on, most of it is still intact. Our coastal trail is intact. We had a big campaign to try to save it a couple of years ago because it was sinking into the water. And it's still there because we deposited sand. So I totally am on board with what you're saying. So second question, offshore deposits of sand. Okay, we've had some discussion with people who are sedimentologists and so on, and they said that there should be ancient deposits of sand from, San Juan Creek millions of years ago, depositing big piles of sand underneath the water. And there's no studies. I tried to get bathymetric maps, and our area is not mapped. We don't know what's really under our water, offsite the Capistrano Bight, and I'd really like to know. I mean, can we study it and find out? There could be a big pile of sand down there that we could just dig up and throw back on the beach.
So I agree that there's not good data characterizing the distribution of sand along this stretch of the coastline, and I think that's a really good topic for data acquisition. There was some work done with the planning of the Doheny desal plant. I understand there was some exploration of the subsurface in the area near where the Doheny desal plant's going in. But because I became interested in this idea of a sand bypass, I've started to reach out to see if there's some data on sort of not ancient sand deposits, but more recent, because the ancient stuff could be buried deep in the ground and may not be accessible. But there may be some more recent deposits near the outlet of San Juan Creek that are more accessible and suitable for like a bypass. And it's definitely worth investigation.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that there actually is a sand deposit out there, because at one point somebody sent me a satellite photo and it showed sort of an eyebrow of sand, this giant sandbar. It's gone, it seems to be gone now. But at the time, sorry, it went from the jetty all the way over to Pochi Beach.
Yeah.
And that would be a great place to mine some sand. Okay, third question,
Oh,
really
I'm
quick.
sorry.
No, it's
Tony,
okay.
Can I have one more?
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go
He's
ahead.
gonna let me go one.
Yeah.
Okay, this is important stuff. Okay, third
tough.
thing. We happen to be boaters, my husband and I. And if you have, we're voters and boaters. But if you get in a boat and you start heading out, from Dana Point Harbor, you notice that as you come out of the harbor, it's, the water's like 50 feet deep or something like that. And you go out not very far, and suddenly there's this big drop. It's not the continental shelf. There's this first drop that's pretty deep. Like, it starts blinking. It's like 300-400 feet deep or something. And then you go further and you get the whole continental shelf, and then you're just off the charts. You're over 1,000 feet. Is it possible that one of our problems is that the sand is being pulled out and it's dropping over that first gully? And this is why I'd really like to see somebody map the darn area so we know where the sand is. But I have a feeling it's down there.
Well, in general, that's what happens along all coastlines. Sand gets pulled offshore into deeper water and will go over shelves, and it won't come back into the littoral zone after that. It's part of the way nature works. And so really, when the big wave events come, the bigger the waves, the farther down into the water they create a current. Okay, so basically the waves cause the water to move in kind of an orbital motion, and as you go deeper and deeper down into you feel the effects of the waves. So you need really big waves to move sand in deep water, and when you get really big waves, you do see sand get moved offshore, and then the smaller waves that push sand on shore can only work in shallower water. So there's this concept in coastal management or coastal geology called the depth of closure. It's basically the depth at which, once the sand goes beyond that depth, nature's not going to pull it back. And generally, it's not cost effective to go down, into really deep areas to try to mine sand. So we're looking for opportunities that are going to be more sort of accessible than that.
Yeah, first of all, I really appreciate the dialogue. This is about as techie as we get in a town hall. In 107 town halls, I think this is about as much. No, but I really like where you're going with that, Tony, because it seems to me that we ought to have a follow-up conversation with Professor Sanders and UCI. We have been able to get community project funding for Scripps, for example, for some of the LIDAR work that they're doing. And we worked with the County of San Diego. It seems we could work with Katrina and the County of Orange and look at some federal support for this.
To do that.
So let's definitely follow up, and I want to make sure you two get each other's contact as well. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna shout out the next three numbers: 005, 008, 011. And if we could just please keep it to one question so everybody gets a chance, and then after you ask a question, if you could return your seat. Thank you.
Congressman Levin, Stuart Gabriel.
Hi, Stuart. Good to see you.
Good to be here, sir. As you know, I've continued to raise issues about the systems modernization, the implementation of things, and next time you're at the VA, look at some of the kiosks that have been installed. You have to be a genius to figure out how to put your ID card in. Seriously.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring your attention to, we've heard a lot of testimony, there's been GAO reports on systems, but what I don't see in any of them is a discussion of business process first. Industry has taught us that if you don't have good business processes, it's impossible to build systems. And I don't see any of that in the testimony. I've heard the secretary speak. And I think in your queue was a book by Mike Hammer, Business Process Reengineering, and that's the kind of stuff that I'd like to hear more from the leadership.
I really appreciate that, Stuart, and I think you're spot on with regard to some of the upgrades and the modernization. The learning curve is steep. I will tell you that I am pleased that they're modernizing. So I'm on the VA, the Veterans Affairs Committee, and the subcommittee that has jurisdiction over a lot of different systems, and I wanted to understand the state of technology of some of these systems. So in particular, it was a constituent who was having a really hard time making simple changes to their GI Bill processing. And so I asked, well, where is all the GI Bill stuff actually happening? Is there a call center somewhere? And they said, yeah, there's one call center in Muskogee, Oklahoma. So I said, okay, we're going to Muskogee. I want to go see it. So I actually did go with committee staff, and I went and visited Muskogee, Oklahoma. Anybody here been to Muskogee, Oklahoma? You go to Tulsa, and then you keep going. You keep going. But it's a converted, one building, a big old converted grocery store with all these very nice people that somehow were able to cobble together all these antiquated systems to process GI Bill claims. And the one person, I'll probably run out of time here in a sec. He's tough, though. He's tough. I'll go a little over time. One person, when I was watching, all the veteran wanted to do is change their address from Phoenix, Arizona, I think, to San Diego. And it was like impossible for them to do that. So I asked the person running the system, well, what software does this use? And they said COBOL. COBOL is from the 60s. And they're still able to process. So this was back in 2019. We were able to help them get the overall program $130 million. And we funded it, and they're in the process of modernizing it. So when I talk to the people that are modernizing it next, I'm going to ask them, I'm going to follow up on what you just asked me, and I'm going to also remind them not to make it so complicated that veterans can't figure out how to use it. So points are well taken.
I mean, if you look at things, press release about post-traumatic stress, they call it Nationwide Center, and they have a nice web page.
Yeah.
But all those calls go back to local. There's no incremental.
Right.
It's kind of a.
That's another challenge, and we're trying to get them to geo-map it as opposed to area code. The problem is it's area code, and if you don't live, so say you have a 310 area code, it's going to send you to LA.
And there's just not enough resources on the other end of the line.
Right. No,
Great
point. Yeah, that one, Stuart, they're trying to fix. I know for a fact. Thank you very much.
Hi, Congressman. I'm Matt Whalen from San Clemente. Actually, I just live over the hill.
I love it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to our neighborhood.
It's good to be here.
Yes. So I have a question about songs.
Yep.
So now that the nuclear reactor is basically decommissioned, it seems like there's a lot of infrastructure there that could be supplying energy to the grid. Mm-hmm. Are there any plans to, say, convert songs to, say, a solar facility or something like that?
Matt, I think that'd be a really good idea. It's not up to us, it's up to the Navy, ultimately what they want to do with the site. But I can tell you that what is there are synchronous condensers that were installed to be the backbone of the power grid between Orange County and San Diego County. And so there is the opportunity, Songs was a 2 gigawatt site, so there would be an opportunity, I think, to have a significant renewable energy presence there. Now, the Navy will tell you they didn't sign up to host nuclear waste in perpetuity, and they want to bring that site back to potentially for use for amphibious training for their Marines. But the synchronous condensers are going to stay for the foreseeable future, certainly for our lifetimes, our kids' lifetimes. So I actually love what you just said. I think there are a lot of creative ideas out there of how you could use that site, put it to its best and highest use, and I certainly think renewable energy production would be a great one. And frankly, in line with a lot of what DoD wants to do. DoD sees energy security as renewable energy. That's something that I think is very important. When you think about energy independence, when you think about getting away from the bad geopolitics of fossil fuels, particularly countries that don't like us so much, even if we increase domestic production of fossil fuels, we are still reliant on OPEC and on global oil markets and commodity markets, and the volatility that hurts every single one of us that relies on fossil fuels. When the prices go up, prices go down. And so they see energy security and renewable energy all as the same thing. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Let me get the next three up here. 012, 016, and 023.
Hi, my name is Carl Reitz. I'm from San Clemente.
Hi, Carl.
My question is, one of the sources of sand that we've heard about is bluff erosion. And it seems to me that we prevent bluff erosion, even though it happens, from all of that material to reaching the beaches. For example, on the railroad and all of the rock revetments that prevent that movement out, and the building that we have along the coastline. Is that a real problem? Is there any thought about if we change the railroad, for example, would allow for greater movement of sand from bluff erosion?
Yeah, excellent point. The bluff, as I mentioned, bluff erosion is a significant contributor of sediment and sand into the littoral zone, and in general, right? But when you put a railroad at the bottom, at the toe of the bluff, how is sand supposed to flow into the littoral zone? And when you put housing on top of the bluff, and then homeowners are rightly concerned about their home, being, washed away into the sea, and so you put some sort of vegetation or some sort of a protection on your bluff so that it doesn't erode. So there is a natural, there's a reduction in the sand supply from development, from railroads and infrastructure that blocks the flow of sand into the water, and there is an effort to armor the coastline, to stabilize bluffs so that people can protect their properties. And so there's this natural tension between private property ownership and a public resource. And I don't know, the solution to that problem is a policy, right?
The next three numbers, 020, 015, and 019.
Don't be shy. Nobody got those?
Okay, we're going to keep trying. 006.
Otherwise, I'm going to start asking Professor Sanders questions.
006, 014, and 007, 007.
There you go, there you go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Susie Whitelaw with Save Our Beaches San Clemente.
Oh, fantastic. That's going your way. I don't know, maybe.
No, Mike, I got questions for you.
Okay.
I came
Okay,
prepared
very
with a question for you. We really, truly are so grateful for all your leadership in bringing this project to our shores and in helping us resolve the thorny issues and cobbles that have come along the way. And a shout out to your staff, especially Kyle Crahell, for helping us understand everything.
Love that.
And keep in touch with us. My question is, the original feasibility study back in 2010 looked at the entire coastline of San Clemente, looked at the erosion rates and the maintenance that would be required to repair things based upon the erosion rates then. And we came up with $15 million. We spent $15 million last March. The rates of erosion have so increased, as Dr. Sanders has said, and the costs are astronomically high. And so we did ask the Army Corps of Engineers if we could redo the feasibility study with the new erosion rates and the cost-benefit analysis, and they said, sure. After we cancel this project, we'll start a new one. Yes. And so we said, we're not going to do that, but my question is, can we somehow be eligible for more federal funding based upon the strategic asset that we have at the railroad? And specifically, there's one program, FEMA has a pre-disaster mitigation fund, which seems like it's exactly what we need before we have a major train derailment. Yeah. Let's fix it and let's protect our railroad.
Thank you so much. So the answer is maybe. And we are trying to understand, we're looking under every rock at what federal funds might be available. The rail corridor, there's a whole host of challenges with the rail corridor. As I said before, sand stabilization and stakeholder engagement, but there's certain things we know. We know, for example, it doesn't impact San Clemente so much, but we need a new bridge down by the Del Mar Fairgrounds because that bridge is literally, in very bad shape. And so we're using whatever federal program we can to get money for that. I think the multimodal discretionary program, grant program funds hopefully will come through for that. For studying more long-term, you were talking about the kind of, to your point, if we need to move the tracks. So that is going to require a tremendous amount of study and stakeholder engagement, and trying to get funding for OCTA for that. We were able to get $3.5 million out of the $4 million that they requested for that. So in terms of a pre-disaster sort of program, I think it's a great idea. And I really have encouraged my team, look under every rock and try to find any funding that you can and work with the community. And just because the Army Corps, look, the Army Corps is a bureaucracy, okay? And just getting them to change their thinking with regard to our entire coastline has been a great challenge. But I think we finally are there where they understand this is about more than just, pretty beach. It's about safety, it's about the national defense. And so we just have to keep at it with them. Because, for the rest of our lifetime and the rest of our kids' lifetimes, those Girl Scouts that were here, their kids, we're all going to be dealing with this. This is part of living by the coast. So the federal government has to play a key role, and I am absolutely going to be focused and committed to it for as long as I have the opportunity to serve.
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
A lot of the people in San Clemente are really cool with the railroad staying there. We
Yeah.
like it how it makes us a transit-friendly city,
Yeah.
and that it brings in people for those tourist dollars. And we think that it should be protected with a wide sandy beach,
Yep.
like it has been protected for the last 120 years. And so
Yep.
we want it to stay and bring environmental goodness
Yep.
instead of the environmental adverse impacts of trying to do a $30 billion tunnel.
Right, and that
So
may be
that's our
be where everyone lands. I think the key there is that every year we put very expensive Band-Aids on it, right? So what happened in Cypress Shores, for example, this past year, and what we had to do, Katrina Foley was awesome, and OCTA was great with regard to Casa Romantica and the landslide and having to have that retaining wall that's there now. So that sort of thing. So sand stabilization, stakeholder engagement, the stabilization piece could get pretty pricey. And look, we've been putting very expensive Band-Aids on the bluffs in Del Mar. I think we're on the 5th phase of a project that costs tens of millions of dollars a year. But I always quantify it where if we were to lose the rail corridor, it's about $1 billion a year in economic activity, what it means. So you hear about the passengers, but think about the commerce, about $1 billion a year. So if it's shut down for a month, you can do the math. A lot of money if it's $1 billion a year, right? So to the extent we put 10, 20, 30 million, versus if it's closed and we were to lose 3, 4, 5 times that, right? But in any event, it's expensive, and then moving it's more expensive still. Keeping it's expensive. It's just expensive. What else is new around here? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to queue up the next three, 002, 010,
How are you?
and 022.
All right, were you 007?
I'm I'm 014.
Okay.
Double 007. Thank you, Professor, and thank you, Congressman, for coming today.
What was your name? I'm sorry.
Scott Hornbeek.
Thank you,
I
Scott.
live in San Clemente. I live that way,
Okay.
so I have a pretty nice view of songs.
Yep.
So every morning I look at songs, and I've lived here 12 years, and I thought, wow, okay, all this waste is down there now. It's right on the bluffs. It's buried about 25 or 30 feet above sea level.
Yeah.
So my question is, I wholly agree with you that there's probably a market solution to the piece of somewhere in the United States we could probably talk somebody into taking our waste. But you said politically it's just a non-starter. Why? And what can we do about it?
Well, ultimately, you got to have the consent of Nevada. And so when the federal government decided in '87, so I'll take a step back. In 1982, Nuclear Waste Policy Act said the federal government was going to pick 2 sites. Then in 1987, it went to 1 site. The folks in Nevada have a nice phrase that they use for that particular piece of legislation, something I can't repeat while we're on Facebook and all that. But Nevada has been the only solution since 1987. And what wound up happening is over time, Nevada said, hey, wait, we didn't want this stuff. And Harry Reid went, from the junior senator to being the leader of the Senate. And very strategically and wisely, in 2007, Harry Reid went to both Hillary Clinton and Obama and said, if you want my support, you're going to come out publicly against Yucca Mountain. And they both did. And when Obama won, they followed through on that, and they said no Yucca Mountain. And when Trump got in, for a while, everything, Trump said everything Obama did was wrong, so they were going to do the opposite. And we were working with the Trump folks in 18 and 19, and they had as part of their budget Yucca Mountain. And we said, okay, we're going to talk to them about that. And then I think with a rumor, and actually it's not a rumor, I heard it from the Department of Energy, from the people who know, is that the late casino magnate, Sheldon Adelson, told Trump personally, I don't want nuclear waste coming through Nevada near the Venetian and the Palazzo and all the casinos. And then Trump, this is a true story, Trump, without prior knowledge of the DOE, tweeted, I respect the will of Nevada and I will not allow nuclear waste to go to Nevada, right? And his own DOE, they're like, well, looks like we're gonna have an interesting, change of course here. So that was the end of that. Then a lot of new people got elected in Nevada on the premise, including good friends of mine, in the House and then others in the Senate. They ran on we're not going to let the waste come to Nevada, right? And so now you have a governor, you have 2 senators, you have several House members of both parties, and none of them want it. Then you have all the local leaders who say, heck no. So you have every member that matters saying no. The same is true, there are a couple other things. In New Mexico and in Texas, there have been efforts by private companies. In New Mexico, a company called Holtec, and in Texas, a company called Waste Control Specialists have tried to do storage sites. And the New Mexicans don't want it, and the Texans don't want it for different reasons. New Mexico, it's mostly environmental concerns. In Texas, it's a mix. Governor Abbott doesn't want it because they want it for shale. They want that area for fracking. And so you do nuclear waste, and that's not such a good look for fracking. So add it all up, and what does all this mean? It means you've got to get consent up front, right? They didn't get the Nevadans' consent in the 80s and 90s. They didn't get New Mexico or Texas on board. So you've got to make the effort to go out into these communities and do the hard work and figure out pragmatically what's it going to take. And that's what the DOE is finally committed to doing. I would argue 30 or 40, I said 20 before, it's more like 40 years behind where they should have. If you look at other countries where they've successfully managed spent nuclear fuel, Finland immediately comes to mind. I was with the Finnish ambassador talking about this a couple months ago, and they went and got consent. They made it a contest, and people were fighting for the economic opportunity and the jobs and the development that would come with hosting one of these sites, right? So that's the kind of thinking that we need, and they finally are going in that direction. And I'm trying to make sure, because Jennifer Granholm is not going to be Secretary of Energy forever, that what we do now, we go far enough down the road where you can't turn back the next administration or the one after that saying, oh, we don't like that approach. We've got to move full speed ahead. So we got them the money to do it, and we've got to follow up aggressively. The new person who's in charge at DOE, there's 2 people, Dr. Katie Huff and Paul Murray, who comes from 30 years in industry. So I'm working with both of them on this plan. So we're getting there.
Thank you. And I'm just 100% behind market-based solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, hopefully we're going to do everything humanly possible to get this right.
Okay, the numbers next are 004, 003, and 013.
Oh, hi. I'm
Hi.
Jennifer Massey, otherwise known around town as Jiffy.
Hi,
That's my
Jiffy.
nickname.
How are you?
Hi, good to see you again.
You
Thank
too,
you.
you too.
We're so grateful for you taking the time away
Thank
from
you,
Chrissy
Jiffy.
and the kids
Thank you.
to
Thank
be with
you.
us. I'm going to change the subject. I live too close to Songs. I've been with San Clemente Green fighting the whole nuclear waste issue forever. But I just want to bring up another problem. I'm convinced the San Clemente City Council to prohibit e-bikes from the beach trail.
Huh.
Now I was told that San Clemente cannot pass a law restricting drivers to 18 plus, have license plates on e-bikes, and have lights front and back to save lives and lawsuits. They told me it had to be a state law. And if, I don't know if that's true or not, I haven't double checked, but I just wonder if there's anything you think we should do to get that passed, because some kid is gonna get killed, and then somebody's gonna have their fortune stolen from in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And we have in town kids riding around at night in the dark, in dark clothing, no license plates, no lights on them, no lights on the vehicle. And so I just wanted to know if you have any suggestions of what we should do next.
Well, I know it is, there are state laws that are being considered. So this is all relatively new territory with regard to e-bikes. My thought is that we do need some sort of, basic education, and there needs to be some basic, responsibility that people take, because these things are fast. Yes. We have actually a great e-bike manufacturer here in San Clemente, Murph Electric Bikes. The San Clemente Chamber of Commerce took me around different businesses in town, and I went and visited Murph Electric Bikes, and I asked the founder of the company, let's go for a ride. This is out in Talega. So I think played a trick on me, put me on the fastest e-bike, because I'd never been on an e-bike before, but I had my helmet on, and we were flying, man, through the streets of Talega, and I said, this is really fun, but also could be really dangerous. Yes. So, I have an 11-year-old. I don't want him to have an e-bike anytime soon. And, when I see these kids that are out there, I worry about it just like you do. So what I would suggest you do is we can follow up, we can get you in touch with your state legislators, because they are working on that. I don't see anything at the federal level, very likely, but because I think it would be overly prescriptive to do at the federal level, but let's get you in touch with some of our friends in Sacramento. And look, if I had $1 for every time I got frustrated with Sacramento, we could all go to a nice meal. We go to South and Nick's, we go to a nice meal. But on this one, hopefully they could do something that you would like.
Are you okay to do one more?
Sure, go ahead, Jiffy.
This is to do with restricting stores and restaurants from using non-biodegradable containers for people to take home what they haven't eaten.
That'd probably be a city thing.
I think that's
Yeah.
more of a local issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got it. You got it. Thank you. Hi, sir. How are you?
Hi, I'm Dave Hellman. I'm from the Short Cliffs area of San Clemente.
I know it well. How are you, Dave?
Great. My question is the general effort to deal with immigration.
Yep.
It's now starting to affect some Democratic legislators.
Yep.
What do you see is going to be the solution? What is the
well, I am
compromise?
hopeful. I am hopeful. I am trying to push for a bipartisan compromise, and we have a bill called the Dignity Act. The two leads are Salazar, Republican from Florida, and Escobar, Democrat from Texas. And the bill combines border security, funding Border Patrol, actually trying to create a path for those who've worked hard, played by the rules, and particularly our military members who have served here, for dreamers who were, came to the United States 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, went to school here, work here, etc. And those are the things we ought to agree on. So I think that if everybody could just put their politics aside for a minute, and the problem that I see is that you've got a lot of people that just want the issue. They want to run on the issue. Yes. And they want to point fingers and cast aspersions and, and it fits their electoral strategy. But meanwhile, we do have a real challenge that we've got to address. I go down the border frequently. I also see our friends here locally at the San Clemente checkpoint. I've been trying to get the requisite funding for them to be able to run that checkpoint more frequently so we can prevent drugs from coming into Orange County. Because as it stands, if it only runs every once in a while. And I asked a question that I didn't know the answer to, and I'll share it with you. Hopefully they won't mind my sharing this. So why is it that that checkpoint can only run like an hour and then they shut it down? And I don't like getting stuck in traffic any more than you do. But if it meant that we were preventing fentanyl or other drugs or human trafficking, I would be okay with that. And I think you would too. And what they told me is they showed me, they have an agreement with Caltrans. They can only back up traffic 1 mile. They can only back up traffic 1 mile, which means they can only really run that checkpoint like 15, 20 minutes by the time it takes to start it up and to shut it down. If anybody is watching this that wants to use that information for bad, I have encouraged them, run it at different hours, at different times, and keep them guessing, right? I have an 11-year-old and 9-year-old at home, and I'm scared to death of this stuff. So broader question, I think we can work together if people are willing to set politics aside and just solve the problem. I think we can do it. The last time we had comprehensive immigration reform was 1986. Reagan worked with Tip O'Neill. And I know it.
I'm telling you, in media, we're not doing it.
I know it.
We don't want Biden to get reelected.
I know it. I know it. And unfortunately, I can't solve that. So all I know is got to win in November.
Just keep talking about it. Keep letting everybody who's got a microphone keep
That's
talking,
right.
because our side's not loud enough.
That's right. That's right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We're going to queue up the last one. No more tickets in the basket. 018.
That's me. That was what I was going to talk about.
Is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go up there if you want.
No, I was going to just have you expand on
Okay.
immigration and maybe talking about exactly stuff like that.
Okay.
But getting it, grab somebody from
Yeah.
MSNBC and make them talk. Because
Good-
all you hear
good luck.
about is that we're not going to do it, we're not going to do it, we're not going to compromise, we're not going to do it. They just want the issue.
Everything. So I'm part of something called the Reagan O'Neill Club. It's a group of us. I don't know exactly how many people are in it, but I'll tell you, and this is a little off script, but she had a ticket, so I'm gonna speak to this. So what happens in Washington is we all get there from wherever we are from, and the first meeting that we usually have is with our different caucus, right? So the Democratic caucus meets, the Republican, they call it the conference, Republican conference meets, but we are literally sent to our corners. We are told what we are going to fight about, and then we are told to go fight. And that's how it works. And you wonder why we fight all the time. So a group of us said, well, how can we do something different? So you go back to Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill in the 80s. They didn't agree on everything. They disagreed like cats and dogs. But they were friends, and they knew, both of them I think knew, that they needed one another to get things done. And they both, I believe, were decent and honorable public servants and committed to a cause greater than just their self-interest. And both saw that opportunity to do something big. And they did, again and again and again and again. And we look back on both of them quite favorably, right? So why can't we do that again?
Compromise.
Why can't? And that's the essence. And people go back to, they say, why can't you just do everything like FDR did? Well, FDR compromised a lot. He had pretty big majorities in the House and Senate. I went back and read and researched everything I could on that era because I wanted to understand. And it's all about compromise. And that's what folks today need to understand. And I worry a lot about our modern media environment, which is all about engagement rather than information, and about entertainment.
Yeah.
They call it angertainment. Rather than just educating people on the issues, and we can disagree without tearing each other up, right?
It's what husbands and wives have to do every day.
Exactly. I don't expect anybody to agree with me 100% of the time, including my wife. But I do hope that we can remember that there's so much more that brings us together than sometimes we like to think about. I think we're going to have a great renaissance of kindness in this country. I really believe that. I really believe that. But we need your help to do it. All right.
Okay, Congressman, this is your last question.
Okay.
So, however, before I get to let you answer, before I get to let her ask and you answer the last question, I do want to say thank you to all the volunteers. Once again, we can never do this without you. And to all of you who have attended, you will have noticed that there are comment cards on your chairs. And if you could please fill those out for us, because the only way we can make improvements and get better and create a better experience for the constituents throughout the district is with your feedback. So I do read all of them. I will be sharing them with the team. And so if you could please be kind enough to fill those out for us. There will be people at the exit collecting those for you, so drop those in the box. And that's all I have, I think, for now. And I'm going to let Cindy.
Hi, my name is Kathy Hornbeek.
Hi,
I live
Kathy.
here in San Clemente. I guess this is actually a big question. I thought it would be a little one, but it's not. What is your opinion on the way that money comes into the campaign system in this day and age? I guess that's a biggie.
Well, I think it's a disaster, to tell you the truth. So the campaign finance system is completely broken, and the reason that it exists is because the people who are in office are good at manipulating it. Simple as that. And I am one of, I think, around 60 members of Congress that don't take any corporate PAC funding. But when you look at a lot of members of Congress and you wonder, why do they vote the way that they do? Well, if you have big oil in your ear or big ag in your ear, I mean, we're doing the Farm Bill right now. And you take a look at some of the subsidies that we give and, and the way that we, look, it's nothing is easy, right? There's always competitive arguments that are made. But, one thing that's very important to me with young kids is that I want our kids to eat healthy food. Right. And I remember we had McDonald's, I don't want to pick on McDonald's, but we had McDonald's out in front of the Capitol giving out French fries. And I thought, man, this is, like they're a really powerful company, a very wealthy company. I've never had broccoli come and lobby, I've never had Brussels sprouts come and lobby. And I only bring that up as one of a million examples of, you wonder, why does Congress land where they do? And a lot of times it's because of those special interest contributions. And so I'd like to see that done away with. I have legislation that I'm a co-sponsor of that would ban corporate PACs altogether. Now this Supreme Court won't go for it, right? The Citizens United decision back in 2010, I believe, led to a lot of this. And, I think that we're still feeling the consequences of that decision. So I think members of Congress spend far too much time having to worry about it. I am really proud of the fact that we've been able to run and win and win and win with no corporate PAC money and the average contribution of about $50. So I'm very proud of that. But that's the exception rather than the rule. So, I would just encourage you, when you're considering supporting a campaign or a candidate for any office, try to figure out where they get their funds from, because that's probably a pretty good tell of where their priorities are. So with that, I want to say thanks again to Professor Sanders. Thank you for teaching us today. I learned a lot from you today. If they want to follow you, how can they follow you?
Yeah, if you Google Brett Sanders, you can find my email address. I have a lab called the Flood Lab, floodlab.eng.uci.edu. But all my contact information is available online. Just Google Brett Sanders, UCI. You'll find me.
Thank you. Wasn't he fantastic? Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.